Well, good evening, everybody. So good to be here again. Um, are we all together? Yes. All right. Good that we're all together. We have a lot of competition tonight, and we thank everybody for coming to see us and to hear us. And many wonderful stories are prepared for you. And so let's get the evening going. Liz, take it away.
All right. Okay. Thanks. And this is Marnie, our wonderful tech host who's spotlighting everybody. Thanks, Marnie. We couldn't do this without you. And this is Contra Costa Tail Spinners on Zoom. And as Sally said, we have a really fun evening. And we'll get going right away with our first storyteller, Vicki Ness, who comes to us from Sonoma County and the Do Tell Swap, where she's a powerhouse, and we love it when you come visit us. So please tell us a story, Vicki.
Thank you. This is a little bit of a ghosty story because October's coming up. I don't normally tell them, so I'm going to give it a try. Once upon a time, long ago and far, far away, 3 young men took off to the next village, walking down a dusty road together. Now, they had their full wine sacks, and they were young, high-spirited young men. And so they were getting a little silly, and they would dance and they would push each other among all the shuffling peasants going this way and the grinding ox carts going that way and the high-stepping horses between them. And they were having a grand time because, you see, one of them was getting married the next day in just that village. And the other 2 were his best friends. And oh, they were drinking and having a good time down the road. Well, of course, at some point, the bridegroom needed to go pee, in just so many words. And so he took off into the bushes and went up the hill just a little bit, and his friends waited. And suddenly they heard a hollering, and they ran into the bushes, and there he was, the bridegroom, pale as a sheet, looking down at the ground, pointing. And there was a stick in the ground. It wasn't even a very big stick in the ground. And they looked closer, and it was a finger. And they all stepped back in horror of the thought that somebody buried a corpse in such a shallow grave that a finger stuck up. Oh, this is disgusting. And a rotted, degraded finger it was, too. But then, of course, being young men who had a snoot full of wine, they started double daring the bridegroom to slip the ring on the finger in the ground and say the vows. Go on, do it. Let's see if you can do it. You're scared. You can't do it. Well, of course, he took up the dare and he put the ring on the finger and he said very quickly, with this ring, I thee wed. And he was just about to grab that ring right back off when the finger started to move. And they stepped back even farther. And the earth began to shift and crumble. And presently it opened up like a wound. And crawling, lurching out of it, came a skeletal woman with decaying flesh and rotten rags hanging from her. Embers bright red in the back of her black sockets of eyes. Clattering her teeth delightedly, looking at her ring, she pointed to the bridegroom and said, "You, my pretty bridegroom, you belong to me now." Oh, the young men fell over each other running down the road into the hotel where they were staying for the night. And that night, sitting around over their drinks, once again having a snootful, they decided that they would never, ever, ever do anything that stupid again. Oh, that was so stupid. Well, the next morning, the bridegroom woke up with a little bit of a headache, but he also didn't have a ring. But being a resourceful young man, he went down to the jeweler and he found himself a ring, and he showed up where the ceremony was, out in a lovely flower-strewn field, and there were flowers in a bower over where he would stand for his vows, and ribbons, and why they were family and friends and neighbors and people who hadn't seen each other in ages, talking and laughing, waiting for the wedding, children running. Well, he walked up and took his place next to the holy man. And that's when everybody sat down. And the old ladies dug around and got their handkerchiefs for dabbing their eyes. And the old men got their frowny smiles on. Yep. And the kids quieted down. And here she came. Somebody started singing, and here she came. The bride was beautiful, every bit as good looking as the groom was handsome. Oh, they would make a beautiful couple. And the old ladies dabbed their eyes, and the old men smiled their frowny smiles. And the kids pointed. Oh, it was a beautiful moment. And she wafted down as light as a cloud. But the bridegroom saw something beyond her. It was the terrible, skeletal, shrieky woman. And she was standing at the end of the aisle. And she pointed to him and she held up her ring. And then she shrieked a horrible, blood-curdling shriek that froze everybody. They could look neither right nor left nor up or down. And finally, they slowly melted back into themselves and looked to see what had made the terrible shriek. And when they saw it, why, they scattered like dust blown off a table. Gone. Nobody left but the bridegroom and the rattly, skeletally, shrieky lady who started riddle-rattling her way down the aisle. And when she got close to him in a putrid death, oh, she was wreathed in buzzing flies with a train of putrid scent. She pointed to her finger and she said, "The law's the law. You're mine, my pretty bridegroom. Come with me and live in the dark with the creepy crawlies and the ever-ravenous worms. You're mine." Oh, his mind was racing and he said, wait, you can't do that. I just want to make sure it's legal. Give me 24 hours, and if it's legal, I will go with you. And if it isn't, you have to promise to be gone. Yeah. She clicked her teeth happily because she knew that she was in the right. She disappeared. Well, all that night, he talked to the holy men, and he told them a story. And he talked to the judge, and he told them the story, and the story got bigger and more fantastical. And then he talked to a lawyer, and the story turned into a monster all of its own, grotesquities everywhere. And they spent the night looking through papers, reading books, discussing. And finally, at the hour, they showed up with the bridegroom standing behind him. And sure enough, here she came, rickety-rattling down the aisle, dragging her putrid smell, flies all around her. And she said, "You are mine, lost the law." Now, the big judge and the lawyer and the holy man, their eyes were as big as owl's eyes, but the bridegroom's eyes were as tiny as pinpricks. He shuddered and he shook and he held up a book and he said, "Wait." And he brought up the fact that 25 years ago, his parents and the bride's parents were best friends. And in fact, they promised their newborn children to each other in marriage. It was in the book. It's a vow. It's legal. So therefore, his proposing to the rattly, skeleton woman was null and void. There's nothing she could do about it. The law's the law. Seeing she was tricked, she rose up into flames of rage and disappeared up into the sky, which turned leaden, and ashes fell. And a terrible, thick, putrid smell settled down on the town like cement. And maggots rose up, and flowers fell dead. But eventually it cleared out, and the sky grew blue, and the beautiful April air returned, and the ground grew solid, and the flowers popped back up again. And it was a beautiful time to get married. And the beautiful bride and the handsome bridegroom got married. And they lived happily ever after. Except every so often, when the wind would pick up from a little bit of a whisper to a whine to a shriek, or when the winter bare branches would rattle closer and closer to him, he would yell out, and his good wife would ask, "Well, whatever is wrong?" And he would have to answer nothing, because there really was nothing. But the truth of the matter was that while reason and the law had shut the doors on the rattly boned woman and consigned her back to her grave, why, his active imagination and his racing thoughts and his deep horror had in effect opened the doors of his mind. And that's where she walked in, and she settled down into the dark, silent parts of his mind, those dark, still pools that nobody dares touch for fear of what could come out of them. And there she stayed, silent and still, until every so often, why a branch would race against a window pane, or a draft would snuff out a candle. And once again, the terror would rise up from within him. And from within him, a hand would reach out to his soul, and he would hear the echo of her saying, "You are mine, my beautiful bridegroom." And for just a second before his reason stepped in, he knew she was right.
Whoa. Wow. I feel like the temperature dropped 10 degrees in the room where I am. You're bringing us into October. And I'm actually going to a wedding this weekend for the first time in a long time. I hope it will be equally unique, but in a different way. But Vicky, your imagination is always unique.
Well, actually, I just want to give credit. That was a story told to me last weekend by a woman in Greece who said that in her country, it is considered to be a traditional Jewish folktale. And so when I asked her if I could use it, she said, it's such a common folktale here that go ahead. So I changed the ending of it, but I didn't come up with it.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. Well, it sounds like kind of like The Corpse Bride, which, they made a movie, Tim Burton made a movie, but apparently I've read that that's based on an old Jewish folktale. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Thanks. All right. Well, now I'm going to introduce our featured teller for tonight, and that's Ruth Halpern, and you've all come looking forward to seeing her. And I was looking back, Ruth, and I haven't been co-hosting the Contra Costa Tail Spinners that long, but in my notes, we had you in 2015, we had you in 2018, then during the pandemic in 2021. And so we keep trying, we're always trying to get you back. And now it feels like the timing is just about right. Here we are. We're so thrilled to have you back. Again, I think most people here know Ruth, know her from Stagebridge, know her from her storytelling, her story teaching, her story advocacy. And I think one of the things that we all love and is so special, Ruth, is that you tell folk tales and myths. You tell personal stories that are fantastic, and you tell improvised stories, and you're just so versatile. And we never know what you're going to bring, and we're always excited to hear it and look forward to it. So welcome. Thanks so much for coming back.
Thank you. What a great introduction. I was counting in my head, and Sally, maybe you can back me up, but I might have told stories as much as 10 times with the Tail Spinners back in the community center days. So I'm really excited to get to share stories again. And I just want to celebrate all of us for continuing this tradition through these strange times. And getting to be together on Zoom is so much better than not getting to be together at all. So I've got a couple things I want to share with you. And I want to start by telling you a story that I prepared back in August to tell. And due to a stroke of bad luck, I was not able to. So I'm really excited to get to share this story now. Maybe you've had that happen, just a stroke of pure bad luck. Well, this is a story about a man who had a run of bad luck. If he got a beehive, the bees stung him all over. If he planted a fresh crop of corn, all the plants wilted and fell to the earth. If he built a house, it collapsed on top of him. And he finally got so tired of this run of bad luck, he said, "That's it. I am going to start walking. And I'm going to keep walking until I can find someone or something that will tell me why I'm so unlucky." And he set out that very day. And he walked for a day, and he walked for a week, and he walked for a month, and he walked for a year and a day, until at last he found himself in a desert at sunset. And the shadows that streaked back and forth across the desert, some of them were moving. Some of them were wolves. And he realized he had to get to safety as quick as he could. So he spotted a cave up on the flank of a hillside, and he climbed inside and he lit a match. And in the glow from that match, he saw two round green balls gleaming at him. A wolf. He held his match up closer, and he saw that this particular wolf was so mangy and scraggly, it seemed like it only had about 3 teeth, and was blinking at him in the darkness. And rather than just sitting and waiting to face his death, he spoke. He said, "Who are you?" And the wolf said, "Who am I? Who are you? And where are you going?" "I am the unluckiest man in the world, and I'm going to walk until I find someone or something that can tell me why I'm so unlucky." The wolf said, "You are? If you get there, would you ask a question for me?" "Oh, why don't you come with me? It'll make the journey shorter. Come with me, come with me." And the wolf said, "I can't go with you. I can barely lift my head. But if you get there, will you ask a question for me? Will you ask why I'm so weak and feeble and I only have 3 teeth? And what can I do?" And the man said, "Sure, I'll ask your question for you." And then the two of them curled up in the cave and they went to sleep. Well, the next day he went on with his walk, and he walked for a day, and he walked for a week, and he walked for a month, and he walked for a year and a day. And if we were in a room together, we'd all be saying that together. At last, his feet carried him into a forest of enormous trees where the cool shadows under the treetops were like smooth, soothing pools. And he sat down underneath one of those big trees, and he took off his boots and his socks, and he put his feet into the little stream that flowed there. And that's when he noticed, among all these enormous giants of the forest, a single scraggly tree that only had 2 branches and 1 leaf on each branch. And this little scraggly tree said to him, "Who are you and where are you going?" And he explained, but you already know he was so unlucky. And the tree said, "If you get there, would you ask a question for me? Would you ask why I'm so small and scrawny when all the trees around are huge, and what I can do?" And the man said, "Why don't you come with me? You can ask the question yourself." "I'm a tree. I'm not going with you." And the man said, "Very well, I will ask your question." And on he went. And he walked for a day, and he walked for a week, and he walked for a month, and he walked for a year and a day, until his feet had carried him to a valley like a little green bowl. And up on one flank of that bowl was a little white cottage with a fence all around and roses growing over a bower above the gate. And on the windowsill of the cottage was a peach pie, and the wind carried that sweet smell to him. And he was just, when he noticed under the bower a young woman leaning on the gate. And just as he noticed her, she noticed him. And she called out, "Who are you? And where are you going? No one ever comes this way." So he explained about how unlucky he was and how he needed to get answers. And she said, "Oh, Will you ask a question for me? Would you ask why I'm so miserable and sad, and every day it feels like my heart is breaking? He said, come with me. You can ask the question yourself. I can't. I promised my parents I would stay and watch over the cottage. But if you brought me an answer, I'd be so grateful. He said he would. And on he went. And he walked for a day, and he walked for a week, and he walked for a month, and he walked for a year and a day, until the world itself seemed to melt away into shadow and mist, and he found himself at the edge of everything. He couldn't go any further, so he called out, hello! Nothing. Hello, is anyone there? Silence. Hello? I'm so unlucky. Of course there's nothing here. I'm leaving. And he turned on his heel, and at that moment, a voice from around and within him called out, wait. What are you here for? And he turned back. He said, I'm here for an answer. I want to know, why am I so unlucky? Everything I turn my hand to falls apart. What is wrong? Why am I the unluckiest man in the world? And the voice said, you're not unlucky. Not unlucky? What do you mean? I just told you everything bad happens to me. You're not unlucky. You're just not paying attention. You have to look for your luck. I have to look for my luck. I have to look for my luck. Of course. Of course. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That is exactly what I was hoping to find out. Goodbye. And he turned to leave. And the voice said, wait. Don't you have other questions for me? And then he remembered, and he asked the question for the wolf. Why was she so weak and mangy and her teeth were falling out? And a voice that was like the wind and the waves on the shore surrounded him and whispered the answer. And he asked about the tree. Why was it so scraggly and small and only had 2 branches? And that same whirling, whooshing whisper brought him an answer. And he asked about the young woman, why she was so miserable and what she could do. And the voice said, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And he said, and then he said, goodbye, thank you, I'm off to look for my luck. And back he went, all the way back to that little white cottage where this time there was a blackberry pie on the windowsill. And there, under the bower, was the young woman. He ran up to the gate. He said, guess what? Guess what? You're not going to believe this. It's incredible, but it's true. I am not unlucky. The voice from the great beyond said, I'm not unlucky. I just need to look for my luck. I need to look for my luck. So that's what I'm going to do. Bye. And he started walking. And she said, wait, did you ask my question? Yes, I did. Yes, I asked your question. I asked, why are you so miserable and sad and you feel every day like your heart is breaking? And the voice from beyond said, the problem is that you are lonely. And what you need to do is marry the first good man who comes along. And at that, she looked even sadder than she had originally. No men ever come this way. Except you. Would you marry me? I would love to marry you. This house is so beautiful, and to see you smile, I would love to. But I can't. Because if I marry you, I'm just going to stay here in contentment eating pie. I have to go look for my luck. Sorry. And on he went. And he walked all the way back into that deep forest without even looking over his shoulder. until he got to the middle of the forest where that spindly two-branch tree was waiting. And he said, "Guess what? I'm not unlucky. I just have to look for my luck. That's what I'm doing. I'm looking for my luck. See ya." And the tree said, "Wait, did you find out about my question?" "Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I asked your question and why you're so spindly and small when all the trees around you are huge and full grown." And the voice from beyond said, "There's a reason. On the day before your seed fell down to the earth, a band of robbers came through this forest, and they had a huge, heavy treasure chest. They didn't know what to do with it, so they buried it right under the spot where your seed landed. And the reason you're so spindly and scrawny is because your roots can't get down into the earth because that treasure chest is blocking you." And the tree said, I think those robbers left their shovel over there against that other tree. You know, if you dug up the treasure chest, you could have it. I don't need it. It could be yours. And then I could grow tall like the other trees." And the man said, "That's true. I could dig up that chest and I would make it so you could grow big. But it could take days. It could take weeks. I don't have time for that. I have to go look for my luck. So long." And away he walked. And he walked for a day, and he walked for a week, and he walked for a month, and he walked for a year and a day, till his footsteps led him right back to that desert. And he arrived at dusk, when the shadows were slipping to and fro, starting their nocturnal hunt. And he climbed into the cave that he had found before in the side of the cliff, and he lit a match. And in the glow, he saw 2 round green balls, dusky and misty, but it was in fact that same wolf, and he was so happy to see her. "You are not going to believe this. I've been gone a long time, but I found out I am not unlucky. I'm not unlucky. I just need to look for my luck. And as soon as the sun comes up tomorrow, that's what I'm going to do." And he curled up and he pulled his cloak around him, and he was almost asleep when the wolf said, "Wait, what about my question? Did you ask about me?" "Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I remember. I asked about you." And the voice from beyond said, "The reason you're so mangy and weak and your teeth are falling out and you hardly have any fur is you're hungry. And what you should do is eat the first stupid man who comes along." And she ate him.
Oh, yay.
I love a story with a surprise ending. So the reason I didn't get to tell that story this summer is I got all ready to tell it at a camp that I go to every summer called Cazadero Family Performing Arts Camp. And this year it was in a new location up in Nevada City. And they had a heavy COVID protocol. Everyone had to test in advance. And then when we showed up, we had to test again. And everybody was taking care of each other, protecting each other. We arrived on Sunday, and on Wednesday, people started getting sick. In the morning, it was 1, and by noon, it was 3, and by 6 p.m., 7 people had come down with COVID. And by 8 p.m., the camp was empty. So that was my bad luck. But even worse was that I was taking a wonderful workshop called Spoken Word Poetry from a Stagebridge teacher who some of you know, named Jeff Lee. And I had to leave before my poem was done. So I was mad, but I wasn't going to give up. And in fact, neither was Jeff. He got us together on Zoom and we finished the class. And I want to share my poem with you. It's called Everything will be fine. Take the fern trail. Do not take the poison oak trail. Everything will be fine if you take the fern trail. Flip-flops, cut-offs, an inch of stale water sloshing at the bottom of a leaky water bottle. No worries. Take the fern trail. Everything will be fine. Weave through the bobbing banks of ferns, flip-flops scuffing the pine needle carpet. Everything will be fine. Dance between the dappled shadows. The soft breeze kisses your brow. This is scenic. This is manageable. Everything will be fine. And then the trail spits you out onto hot, bare ground. Baked yellow grass crackles under sheets of white heat. Keep walking. Keep walking through the heat. Keep walking through the stickers in your feet. It seems like you're beat, but you cannot retreat. Keep walking. Everything will be fine. A haze of heat fills your brain. How much longer can you remain? You have no choice. Keep walking. Atlas carries Sisyphus, his boulder, and the weight of the world, step by plodding step. You are Atlas. You are Sisyphus. You are the rock. You are the world. Nothing will ever change. And you will falter. Everyone falters. Your dead skin will bake to hardened leather. The ants and the crows will pick red meat off your bones. Nothing will ever change. And yet, you keep walking. Over the crest of the hill, the blue eye of a pond opens. Bulrush lashes fringe the shore. Keep walking. Oasis. Your feet sink in the cool squish at pond's edge. Oasis. Minnows nibble your toes. Oasis. Ease your body into the layers of warm, cooler, cool. Oasis. And float like a starfish adrift in a tide pool. Oasis. You will never leave. You will dedicate yourself to this sacred water source. You will serve the turkeys and the vultures and the snakes. The Canada geese will call out your name. Float, float, float. And yet, a new trail beckons from across the pond, calling you onward. Will you stay or will you go? Keep walking. Everything will be fine. Tick of crickets, sough of wind, creak of bullfrog. The forest wraps itself around you, creeping in dark shadows, offering twisted ankles, bramble-clawed arms. Keep walking. Something brushes your knee. Poison oak. Oh no, you're on the poison oak trail. Keep walking. Every trail is the poison oak trail. Every oasis, only a pause on the journey. Keep walking. Everything will be fine. The forest embraces you. Trees push closer, corralling, trapping, strangling. You keep walking. Crunch and crash of hoofs through the underbrush. Caw, hoot, howl. It's dark, so dark. You cannot see the path. You are lost. Everything is lost. Feel the cool skim of the pond, remembered embrace, close as a second skin. Let it cool you. Let it sit with you. Keep walking. Everything will be fine.
Mm. Ruth, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Keep walking. Everything will be fine. Wow. What a journey we just went on to the edge of the earth and to somewhere very intimately close and all connected through the power of language, the power of storytelling, poetry, and Ruth Halpern. Thank you. So beautiful.
Wonderful.
So beautiful. Ruth, you're always inspiring. And Larry, our next storyteller, Larry Kluger, who's a regular at our swap, told me that he was excited to tell this story because this story had some inspiration from Ruth. So, Larry, I don't know if you want to share before or after your story a little bit about that. Welcome, Larry, and tell us your story.
Okay. A number of years ago, I don't know which time, when Ruth visited our story swap, I told a story in third person, and Ruth probably doesn't remember. And afterwards, she suggested I tell it in first person. And I didn't know if I could do that because it was a woman, and I didn't know if I could tell in a woman's voice. And Ruth encouraged me, saying there's lots of women that tell stories in men's voices. So I went home and decided to try it. And I was able to do that. And I'd like to tell that story tonight, the new version. It's called The Day They Took Charlotte. Although it happened 9 years ago on a June day in 1878, I remember it like it was yesterday. My husband Henry woke me up mighty early that morning, gave me a hug and kiss, and said, "Charlotte, I'll be off in town on business much of the day." That was all right with me. I had plenty of chores to keep me busy. It was about 10 o'clock that morning when those three men rode up to our pioneer cabin. I had just stopped to admire how beautiful this spring day was. The sky was sparkling blue. The river was full and churning with water. The air was so fresh and clear. There must have been 100 birds, each singing their own song. The woods were such an unusually deep shade of green. That's when I noticed those three men approaching on horseback. Although our cabin was in a very remote location on the Kansas-Nebraska border, it was not unusual to see groups of men riding about. There were cowboys looking for stray cattle, men scouting for promising pieces of land, and hunting parties. These men were different, though. I remember thinking, there's something strange about these men. Recognizing that was an accomplishment for me. You see, I wasn't raised on the frontier. I was raised in a thoroughly modern and civilized Midwest town, with all the comforts and conveniences of a thoroughly modern and civilized town. When Papa told us we'd be moving to a frontier town in Nebraska so he could open a store there, I was very excited. He said it was a great business opportunity, but to me, it sounded like an adventure. I didn't realize how uncivilized and isolated it would be, and dirty. A year and a half later, when I married Henry, I was just starting to get used to that frontier town. But Henry's cabin was even much more isolated. When Henry first took me out to his secluded log cabin in the woods, I didn't think I could ever get used to it. How could I ever become a frontier woman? Well, in the year and a half that we had been married, I came to admire the beauty and solitude of the place. I learned to manage without the conveniences of town. I became familiar with the customs of the frontier. I learned to fire a rifle and pistol. I even practiced when Henry wasn't around. I thought I was a pretty good shot. I also learned to identify the different types of people traveling through the area. The three men that rode up this day, they said they were cowboys looking for stray cattle. They didn't look like any cowboys I had ever seen. They weren't wearing the right clothes. And their horses, they were nice horses, but they weren't cow horses. And they were all too heavily armed, each carrying a rifle and two pistols. All those guns would get in the way of a working cowboy. Another thing was strange. They seemed to know that Henry would be gone till late afternoon. I decided these were bad men. They were definitely up to no good. And I started to feel scared. But I told myself, I can't let these men know how I feel. I had learned that on the frontier, hospitality was the rule. So when they asked me, "Can we trouble you for breakfast, ma'am?" I invited them in, hiding my fear. I made them a good breakfast and they sat down to eat. But it was plain to see they weren't really hungry. They just pretended to eat. When they got up, two of the men grabbed me, rushed me out the door, and lifted me up to the third man, who was already mounted on his horse. I had been expecting them to do something and was actually glad they were going to take me away. Our nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. This would at least give me a chance to be rescued. No one would be around our cabin for hours, but in riding off, we might run into one of those wandering groups of men. So when they grabbed me, I didn't struggle or scream. The men rode off at a gallop, up the river and along the edge of the woods. As they rode, I thought about my options. We might run into one of those wandering groups of men. That wasn't very likely. Henry would be home in several hours. He would see the dirty dishes left on the table and the chair that had been knocked over when they rushed me out the door. I would never leave the cabin untidy. He would know something was wrong. He would find the hoof prints of the horses of these bad men and follow them until he found and rescued me. But that wouldn't be for several hours. I would have to find some way to delay these men from their evil actions. I had to be alert for any opportunity that came up. After riding for about 3/4 of an hour, I noticed we were approaching a cabin that I recognized. It had been abandoned early in the spring by a settler whose wife had died. The cabin was small and snug, having a heavy wooden door with a bar to secure it and 2 windows with almost bulletproof inside shutters. The men rode straight up to the cabin and dismounted. I was helped down from the horse before the man who rode with me got down. As my feet touched the ground, my mind and body reacted quickly. I grabbed the pistol from the holster of the man who held me down, bang, and shot him in the leg. Then I ran for the cabin, carrying the smoking weapon in my hand. The half-open door was only 10 feet away, and I was inside and had the door bar in place in just a couple of seconds. The man whom I had wounded had scarcely cried out before I was inside. My actions were so sudden and unexpected that none of the men tried to stop me. Fortunately, the bar for the door was leaning against the wall right behind the door, and as I slid it into place, I thought, now I am safe. 1 man is disabled, and I have 5 bullets left for the other 2. I knew my 3 years of frontier experience had given me the courage and confidence to act quickly and decisively. The wounded man had been shot in the left knee and made a serious fuss out of it. I could hear him cursing and groaning in a terrible way. I heard him vow, "That woman should be burned alive at the stake to pay for my injury." His companions at first made fun of him and praised my courage and spunk. But when they realized how serious his injury was, that he would probably lose his leg, and they had a pack of trouble on their hands, they became extremely angry. They made a rush for the door, expecting to easily grab a hold of me and regain control of the situation. But they found the door locked. They turned to the windows, but they were also locked. It became plain to them that I meant to put up serious resistance, so they pulled back to consider their options. From what I overheard, I was convinced the 2 men wanted to help the wounded man off and leave at once. But he kept repeating, "I won't move an inch till I have my revenge on that woman. This is a lonely neighborhood, and no one's going to come around here before dark. You 2 should batter in that door to get that woman." When they pointed out his injury as proof of my bravery, he fiercely shouted, "Damn that woman! It was an accidental shot. She has my pistol, but she wouldn't use it again, not even to save her life. You 2 should get a log and bash in that door." They found a large log and dragged it over. Then they lifted it and made a rush towards the door. I knew exactly what they were planning, and I was ready. I quietly unbolted one of the window shutters and swung it back until I could see them. When they began their rush for the door, I lifted the pistol, aimed at the man nearest me, and pulled the trigger. Bang! He fell down and died at once, having been shot through the heart. The other man ran away, but circled back to the wounded man. Then the cursing and ranting and storming began again, and the wounded man propped himself up and emptied the contents of his rifle and pistol into the door and windows of the cabin. I flattened myself against the floor in a corner of the cabin just in time. Several bullets fell inside, but I was in a safe place. After he had emptied his weapons, he called upon his partner. "Get that big rock over there and bash in that door. I'll kill you if you don't." I was looking out the window as he said this and saw that the unwounded man seemed to be more afraid of me than he was of his companion, and he refused to comply, saying, "No, that woman is pretty smart as well as being brave. She'll probably just pick me off when I'm not paying attention to her." He was looking at the cabin as he said this and didn't see that his partner, the wounded man, slipped a bullet into his pistol, pointed it towards him, and fired. The bullet was meant to kill, but it didn't even hit. The unwounded man turned, drew his pistol, and fired 3 shots into his attacker's body, causing his death in a minute or two. He didn't go near the body, but waved his hand, indicating he was done with me. He gathered up the horses, tied the rifles to their saddles, and rode off as quickly as he could. When I was sure he was gone, I left the cabin and started walking towards home. After about a mile, I met up with Henry and 3 cowboys who'd come to find and rescue me. I told them what had happened, and the cowboys rode off, pursuing the bad man for many miles, but he finally got away. Henry and I made it home safely. All the way home, he kept looking at me, smiling, shaking his head. Finally, he said, "I didn't really have to worry about you." I didn't reply, but I proudly thought, I'd finally become a frontier woman.
Thank you.
Put in the other.
Hey, I'm unmuted. Thank you, Larry. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. That was great. Loved it. Very brought the past to life. We always look forward to from you, but doing the first person like that, I loved it.
It's a true story, and I found it in a newspaper at the time, the Laramie Weekly Sentinel from 1887. Yeah. And of course I adapted it some.
But it's great. And those women's voices from the frontier, we don't hear them as much.
Yes.
And so it's a wonderful thing that, I think it's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I just want to say that a lot of you know Bev Schwartz, who often comes and joins us from New York, and she was going to be here, but she had a medical thing. So she sends her regards to everyone and hopes to be here next time. So now we will just go straight on and hear from Jane Cole, who is also one of our, you're one of our most loyal, and just, we've just heard so many of your stories of your own adventures, your family's adventures. And Jane said this story has to do with a mother's love. And so I'm looking forward, and I'm sure everyone is.
Well, if you head down Highway 49 in the foothills of the Sierras towards Sonora from Angels Camp, you will cross a very high bridge over Maloney's Reservoir.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that didn't used to be a big lake. It used to be a wild canyon with the Stanislaus River rolling down over the rocks. Now, my family has been in Sonora since about 1906. And we figure that just about the time cars were invented, someone invented the rubber tube that goes inside a car tire. And we think about 10 minutes later, all the kids realized you could float on the river if you had that tube. And our family started floating, I'm sure, from the very beginning. By the time I came along, we were still using car tubes to float the river. Family would drive us down the dry hills, usually to Parrots Ferry. And there we would play in the water and sometimes take our tubes, sling it over your arms, your head, and climb up the boulders all the way up the river as far as you dared go, and jump in the tube and float the rapids back down to Parrots Ferry. Now, this story takes place a little later on. You might remember my cousin Renee of telephone truck fame. Well, this time it's cousin Renee had a plan to help us with our tubing adventures. So his son and two other cousins were about 10 years my junior. And Renee decided that I would probably be a good river guide for these kids. Renee, working for the telephone company up there in the hills, had a ring of keys about this big, just full of keys all the way around. That meant he had the keys for every locked gate you can imagine all through the hills. And he applied a liberal interpretation of what was reasonable activity for a phone company employee. Well, Renee decided to throw us in the back of the four-wheel drive pickup and use those keys through locked gates and through the ranch land down to a quarry at the edge of the Stanislaus. And there we would unpile, and out would hop Snoopy the dog. And in all of our finest river attire, starting with Converse tennis shoes, cut off Levi's, and a t-shirt, hop on the tubes and head down the river. You might notice the absence of anything remotely seeming like safety gear. At one point, we got a hold of some old Army Navy surplus Mae West life vests. And those you tied in a bow in the front in two places, very secure for riding rapids. The problem was they were old. And if you had even the smallest seam rip or the smallest place where the fabric had worn, then the water seeped in and the kapok inside the Mae West acted as a sponge. So before you knew it, instead of a flotation device, you had a sinkation device, and it weighed 50 pounds. So we didn't use the Mae Wests after that. Now, on the day I really want to tell you about, Renee piled us in the truck, Snoopy the dog, the inner tubes, the three boy cousins, and myself. But this time, we added my mom. Now, my mom was over 50 at this time. And when I look back, I think, well, what an adventurous spirit to take this on. I do not know how I talked her into this one. Renee drove us down that four-wheel drive track, down to the river's edge. And this time, we also had a very small rubber raft. So I think two of the cousins were bobbing around in their inner tubes. My mom and I think one more cousin were in this little tiny rubber ducky raft. When we set off, it was often normal for river rafting companies to come by, paddling by. And they were appalled to see kids in inner tubes way up in this remote part of the river, and they could never figure out how we got there. They would tell us, you have no business being up here. This is really dangerous. And we always thought, They just want to convince their clients that their clients are having a big, dangerous, exciting adventure, when really you can just jump in an inner tube and float down. Now, we do have to admit that the names of some of the waterfalls were things like, the rapids were things like Widowmaker and Devil's Cesspool, but that didn't bother us. We thought they just had good imaginations making these things up. Well, on this occasion, Renee helped my mom get settled in this little rubber raft with one of the cousins and myself. I was sitting on the back of the raft because I was going to be the raft guide. We set off and headed down the river, the boys bobbing along in their inner tubes, and Snoopy the dog would plunge in and swim the dog paddle and pull himself out and run barking along the shore and plunge in again when he couldn't get any further. Well, we proceeded down the river and came to this nice little, not really a waterfall. It was just sort of about 1.5 feet high, big, wide, smooth rock with a nice, smooth flow of water going over it. About this deep, the water was flowing. Very nice. So we were going along. I knew that little rapid, and we came up to the rock, and I was ready to just bloop right over it. So over we went, but this was in a rubber raft. We went over just fine, bloop. But when we hit the bottom, we hit an eddy, and the eddy stopped us like a brick wall. I was popped off the end of the raft like a cork out of a bottle, and I barely had time to realize I was in the air when bloop, I was in the water. Right then, an overwhelming instinct hit my mother. She had lightning reflexes. She grabbed my wrist, and with the iron grip of mother love, she was not about to let go. So I went under the raft with the current of the waterfall. The raft is dead stopped. I am now under the raft with my mom holding tight to my wrist. Well, at first, I'm wiggling around trying to get her to let go. After a while, I thought, I may die under here with my mom holding on to my wrist. I couldn't swim against the current to get myself up above the water from under the raft. I needed her to let go so I could flow on by, swim out. Well, she wasn't letting go. Her baby was going to stay in her grip. Well, I thought I may die under the raft laughing if I don't think of something soon. The seconds ticked by. Aha, I thought. I'm going to have to signal her. If I struggle, she'll just hold tighter. So I was able to reach my other hand up and find her wrist and go tap, 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 and pull my hand back down and wait. That was a long wait. Finally, I could feel that the thought hit her, and boo, she released, and bloop, out I went under the raft and up for some air on the other side. I was able to get back in the raft, and we carried on down the river. Now, what we learned from that is that sometimes that primal instinct, that powerful force of mother love has to let go of that grip and trust your babies to find their way. Trust them that they may know what they need to do. The end.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, that was exciting and glad it came out the way it did. I hope it's okay for me to say Ruth told me that she just last week dropped her daughter off at college. So I think that this story
The same
was
thing.
meant to be
Right.
quite a metaphor. I too just got back from spending a 3 weeks with my daughter who's just had her second child, and it's a lot of needing to let go in order to help. So a great story. Okay. Oh, we have someone coming in just now. Okay. We have another story about a parent from Magda Peck, who was our featured teller last month, and we're thrilled you're back, Magda, with another story. Please share it with us.
Great. Hey, well, thank you. I had such a good time last time I was here that I thought, well, when I saw Liz, I'm coming back again. And besides, I need to wish everyone Shana Tova. I mean, it's a new year. And this is, by some account, 5,784 years since the birth of the world, since the birth of Adam and Eve. And for those of us of this tribe, it is an extraordinary time. And it inspired me to say, I'm going to dust off this story that I haven't told in a while. And it's such a big story. It's a hairy story. It's a hard story that I thought tonight, maybe I'd try just to take a scoop of it in about 9, now borrowing from Miss Schwartz, 10 minutes at most. Because it tastes like love. I must have been either side of 40 when I found myself back in the pews of the only Reform synagogue in Omaha, Nebraska. There are 5,000 Jews total in Omaha, only 7,000 in the whole state. And so trying to raise our family Jewishly, I would find myself in the pews. And I started going to Yom Kippur services a couple of years before that. And I liked the idea that I'd be fasting. And I'd been fasting for about 20 hours after the evening service with the cello so mournfully playing, and the morning service, and then the family service, and then the afternoon service. And finally, I'm sitting in the pews 20 hours into my fast for the real reason that I went. I thought maybe this year at the Yitzchor service, the memorial service, the hour set aside when they dim the lights and play quiet, mournful music so we can remember all the folks that can't be with us anymore. I thought maybe this would be the year that the mystery of my dad's death might be revealed, or I'd come closer to solving its riddle. And sure enough, I'm sitting there and I open up the special insert and I see his name, Morton Samuel Peck, in all bold caps. And I wait for the tears to flow. My dad, everybody called him Morty. He was a South Philly boy, first generation Jewish immigrant, Poland, or whatever it might have been at that time, Russia, Ashkenazic Jew, came turn of the century, his parents did, to Philadelphia, went to South Philly High, went off to Penn State, drafted into World War II, refused to carry a gun, was a medic, tried to save men on the battlefield. His last assignment, liberating concentration camps. Came back, settled in suburban Philadelphia, got his MBA at the University of Chicago, Milton Friedman. Started a job, got married, had 1, 2, 3 daughters. I'm the baby girl. And he was sassy and irreverent, and he hated organized religion. We were juiced by bagel, East Coast Philly juice, and we had a very secular suburban life overall. Now, it was idyllic, exactly what was supposed to happen, until it fell apart. The knock at the door, when they came to say that my sister, who had gone off to college, didn't make it back because of a car crash. The business he built from the ground up, going bankrupt and losing all the money. He became what we now talk about as being depressed, in despair, but he never let it show. He kept that humor, that joking go, but there was a point when he could not take it. And so he disappeared with my mom. He said, let's go. They traveled the world. I was 18, liberated. He came back, couldn't make that work. And then he disappeared, surfaced in New Mexico, divorced. No one ever heard from him again except his mother and me. This was a man who at 55 checked himself into a Tucson motel and downed a calculated combination of hoarded antidepressants with his favorite Bombay Sapphire dry gin. The gin I knew so well because I always thought it was cool when I was in 6th grade that I could make him a perfect martini when he came home from work. My father suicided. He chose the date of Yom Kippur. Why? Why would a secular, irreverent, anti-religious man, intelligent, planful, MBA, why would he plan every detail down to the note left at his side, addressed to me? I never forget, it said, take this $100 bill, the other thing that he left, spend it on something completely unnecessary. Why would he choose Yom Kippur? I could not figure it out. I was 25 and heartbroken. The next year, I thought, what am I supposed to do? Of course, I knew I was supposed to go out and buy a Yortzeit candle, the candle that holds about 24 hours worth of wax. And, I knew to light it. I knew you were supposed to just remember. I didn't exactly know because I'd never lost anybody like this. And we certainly didn't do that when my sister died. So I went to synagogue. I was living in Hartford. Someone had tickets, big machers. They had big tickets. We sat all the way down in front. I'd never heard the cello where the bow kisses the strings and you hear something called Kol Nidre. It was such an ancient melody. It was like, da-da, da-da. I think this more, and it ends with hope. It's this, I'm sure I had heard it like clearly 100 times before, although it was the first time. Maybe it was in my bones. And I fasted that year, thinking maybe something will be revealed. And then we got to this memorial service. I didn't know what that was. And all I could do was sob. But the next year I tried again, and the next, and the next, and the next. And I would make it through all the way to the Yitzkor memorial service when I'd lose it, just completely lose it. Well, this went on for quite some time. Married, moved to Omaha, joined the synagogue, sitting in the pews until that one late October afternoon. It was a really late season that year for the holidays, and the light was streaming in through the stained glass windows, dancing colors on the wall next to me, and I made it through Kol Nidre, and I made it through all the morning and 20 hours of fasting. But that particular time, I waited for the cue. Dim the lights, cue the organ, and wait and see what happened. But this time, there were no tears. I was like, So I closed my eyes, like trying to find something to make me sad. Nothing. It had been like 18 years. So I thought, okay, why don't I just imagine like I'm walking down like a empty hotel corridor with doors on either side, 501, 503, 505, and then I had tickets or a key to each one, and I'd open the door, and maybe I'd find a memory in there that would make me cry. So in my mind, I flung open a door to memory, and all I could hear was my father's laughter. It was the time when he took me to the zoo early in the morning to go visit the orangutans. He loved orangutans. One hand on the glass, then the other. The big guy would come over, and the two of them would grunt and move, and he was so embarrassing. And then he was like, but I was cracking up. I thought, I'll close that door, because I'm smiling and everyone around me is somber and sad. So in my mind, I thought, okay, I open another door. And it's the time he told us one by one, meet me at the front door of the Barclay Hotel. We all had on fancy gowns. He had on a tux. My cousin Peter's bar mitzvah. He said, let's blow this joint. I got better food, and we don't need the carved ice statues. And so he picked us up in the wood panel station wagon. We went back to South Philly, his old neighborhood. Pat's, not Gino's, had cheesesteaks standing outside in the cold, the grease running down, my father eating whole hot poppers, sweating up here, and then the napkin here, and then taking the sweat off his neck. I'm cracking up. And I realize at this point that I'm laughing in synagogue, in Yom Kippur, highly inappropriate. And memory after memory came, and I finally got it. The gift he gave me, not just the note, not just the $100, not just the riddle, was to remember him, not for the pain, but for his joy. I never thought I would feel joy. I'm stifling laughter at this point. I look up and I see the young rabbi. She's a young woman. Her father has just passed 7 weeks ago. He had that ashen look of the bereft. And I wanted to tell her, just wait. Just wait. A day will come when you'll open the door of your memory, and the laughter will come back. I went home, and the boys, now 6 and 8, they said, Mom, are you okay? Like, I've never seen you on this day look happy. I said, I figured it out. There was the last bit of just a bit of a candle burning in the Yortzeit candle. I said, come in the kitchen. Let me tell you a story. And ever since that day, my boys would tell stories about the grandfather they knew. They even came to talk about him in the subjunctive tense. You know what Grandpa Morty would have done. And when the last whiff of a candle goes out, every year when the kids grew up after that, Sam, for whom he's named, Morton Samuel, would take the cup in his hands, the empty candle, and he would say, Mom, he's still here. It's still warm. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Magda. That was beautiful, so beautiful. And so,
thank you for letting me bring him in.
thank you for sharing him with us, and what a story for this time of year.
Just like the harvest moon, let's harvest our stories of our dads and our moms. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. That was just phenomenal.
Beautiful. Another beautiful evening of stories. So, Sally, let's turn it back over to Sally. Let's see, I'll remove here we go.
Oh my
There
goodness.
you are, Sally. Okay.
Hey, what a fabulous, fabulous evening. I just feel so blessed. And I'm going to share a secret with you. This was to be my last evening as co-host of help me.
Tail spinners.
Thank you, of the tail spinners. That is one of the reasons. Seem to have gotten old lately, and I thought it's time to give this up. And Dana has blessedly said that she would work with Liz, and then we have Marnie, who has been so wonderful as our technician and with us all the time, went through the pandemic with us, and I thought, oh, I need to step aside. So I called Liz and I said, Liz, I'm stepping aside. You and Dana take it away. And then I thought about tonight, and I thought about how almost 30 years now, three ladies got together and decided they would do a swap, and we got such wonderful backing from the Orinda Library. And we've been going ever since. And I called Liz and I said, Liz, I'm not going to do it. So I'll be around for a little while longer. And yes, and thank you so much for those glorious stories today and all the stories that we've heard through the many years. Tail Spinners has been a blessing to me, and I hope it is a blessing to you. And with that, I will say good night. And keep your stories and come and share them with us. We'd love to hear you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Okay, good night from me.